Yep, we're here now.
All right.
Now we're live.
We're live. Welcome. Scoot over.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I need my wine.
I'll get your wine. Hi. Welcome to yet another episode of Witches and Wine. This is our live YouTube experience. Woo! So, this is the show where we talk about witchy stuff and we drink wine. Clink and drink. Clink and drink. Oh, there we go.
Reach.
And drink.
Yeah, I can't reach over there.
Tasty?
Mm-hmm. That was my first sip.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, this one. I was saving it.
Oh,
For
look at
this.
you. This is so sweet.
Saving it for this.
Saving. So, before we talk about our topic, is that a thing on the? Oh, okay, that's on the screen. Sorry, but all of a sudden I had a mole. Before we talk about our topic, let's talk about the wine we're drinking. Our wine connoisseur Silenus is working hard for his money tonight, so I'm filling in as wine connoisseur. We are drinking an Albino Armani Pinot Grigio. White wine. So let me read about this. He gave me a little handout because I know nothing.
Because you are not the wine connoisseur.
I
You're
am
just the wine
drinker.
and the drinker.
Yes. So this delicate floral Pinot Grigio has flavors of apple, mineral, and hints of spice. This wine is an outstanding testament to Armani's decision to produce wines from prime vineyards under its own label. The perfect aperitif, great with seafood, pasta, or salads. So yeah, it's got crisp apple, mineral, medium body. Do we have a price on this? Runs about $13.99, and I don't know why I'm saying it like that.
Because you're a dork.
Yeah. So, Pinot Grigio, Albino Armani. Check it out.
Hold up for a second. I gotta help Ziggy.
Oh yeah, we got a chubby dog
Come
that needs
on,
up.
Ziggy.
All right. So let's get to our topic. We want to talk about what in the witch world is known as the burning times. Now, there are several schools of thought about this. We are talking about what we have researched, what we know. I'm sure there are differing opinions out there, which we will touch upon. Again, this is not, the end-all, be-all, this is it. What we say is...
Yeah, that would take a lot more time that I don't have and a lot of access to a library that I don't have access to.
No. So this is just in our studies that we've learned, discussions that we've had. We had a discussion about it right before this, so it's fresh on our
That's
mind.
kind of why we segued into this.
Yes, it's...
sometimes it's best just to kind of capture the conversation as it's going instead of letting it fizzle out and then being like, all right, now we're going to talk about the
thing we just talked about 5 minutes ago again. So what are the burning times? So the burning times is a period of time where it was believed or okay, I'm just going to say where witches were persecuted. Thank you. They were persecuted. This was in the 15th, 16th, 17th century. It was about a 300 period of time. There were the old religion that people practiced, which was really, they say it's a religion, but it was more of like, I feel it was like just kind of what was going on in nature and whatnot.
Well, and I think that's part of what makes it so difficult when we are talking burning times, because it's sort of you had a new cultural norm coming in, and the old cultural norm wasn't really ready to go out yet. So it makes it hard to know, was it religious persecution or was it just times they are changing?
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, so for all intents and purposes, we could say the old religion of the pagans, of the people that lived in the rural areas, the people
pagan stems from.
Yeah, is the
It's
people.
the hick from the sticks.
Yeah, like you.
Yeah.
And her. Our other coven sister Willow. I'm the urban witch here, but I want to go out in the sticks. I want to be a hick witch stick witch.
You want to be a wicker woman?
Yes. What she said. I'm sorry, I'm still getting over my cough. So, anyways, so this old religion, these pagans, they did their thing, they danced in the moonlight, and there's a lot of women that were healers. They were called the wise women, cunning women, otherwise known as witches. We could go into the origin of the word witch if we want to, but that could be a whole nother rabbit hole that we go down. But these witchy women that were healers and midwives and whatnot.
And it's important to note that most of them themselves would not have referred to themselves as such.
No.
It's sort of a label that has been applied to them.
Later on.
Which is also where it gets into some gray area territory, because there's a lot of proof that many of them may have just been unlucky Christians.
Yeah, and sorry, that was really bright in my face. I don't look good whitewashed. Wait, anyway. So so I mean we're simplifying it, and if there's anyone out there who's like, well, they're not, using the right terminology, there's a reason why we have limited time. This is a overview.
It's a Cliff Notes version.
It's a Cliff Notes version of what you can look up online and get like a kind of an idea. But so these women that were healers, they worked with the herbs, they delivered the babies, and whatnot. They the Inquisition started by the Christians, the
Holy Roman Empire.
Romans, and decided that for whatever reason these were the oddballs, and they didn't like what they were practicing, and so they started slowly but surely questioning them, torturing them.
Very, very much under duress.
Yes, and getting this whole hype of their devil worshippers, their witches, and again, that's another
honestly
thing.
It's sort of an interesting thing to look up the history of it, because we hear a lot about the torture and that side of things, which happened, but there's a shit ton of people who never even made it there. They died just during the imprisonment phase.
Yeah.
While they were waiting
to go on
trial
yeah.
or go into, any inquisitor or whatever.
But I mean,
the jails at that time were not friendly.
No, and I mean, people died in jail, just from starvation or disease or whatnot. Exposure, yeah. So, but the common perception is they were accused, they were thrown in a jail, and then this is when they were questioned, tortured, to confess that they were practicing something other than Christianity, and under the tortures. I mean, they put them in Iron Maidens, and they did what did you call it, pressing, or
there was the pressing, there was the swimming, the witch. Iron Maiden might be one that's sort of
I don't know. I heard there was Iron Maidens. I don't know. I'm kind of like you, Isleen. I like torture devices. I think they're interesting.
It's like a fascinating thing. Just
I would go to a museum of torture devices just to see. So and Willow thinks we're talking about our S&M.
No. Mine's the fascination with how awful human beings can be to each other.
Yes. And
we can choose to be nice, but instead we choose to be dicks.
Yes.
We're assholes.
It happens.
Which is,
But anyway, so torturing, I don't know, that they stretch them, put the screws and the
thumb screws.
The
thumb screws. There was the breast ripper.
Yeah, there was,
which sounds just as fun as it sounds.
Sounds awful. Yeah,
especially because it's like a 4-pronged thing.
So you would get people confessing to be witches
just to get it to stop.
You know, so of course you're gonna get, you know, and they're like, look at all these witches confessing. Well, yeah, if you're putting a hot poker up my ass, I'll fucking tell you I dance with the devil every night, and you know, whatever. So
because at that point, even death would seem like a mercy.
Yeah.
Even if it was eventually it's going to end at that point.
Yeah, just please kill me, you know. So they got these confessions now, and then they would, why can't I think of the word? I have only had a little bit of wine. They would not torture them. They would kill them. They would, what's the word? Execute. Thank you. Now, this is where the word burning times comes in. So can you explain why that's not maybe necessarily the right term to call it?
Most European countries did other forms of execution. Burning was not that common in overall. It was common in Scotland, did a lot of burning. There were a couple of burnings that happened, I think, in England. Don't quote me on that part. I know Scotland burned people.
I'm quoting you.
Salem burned no one.
Yeah.
Salem had 13 witches that died. 12 were hanged. 1 was pressed to death, and that was a guy. So, yeah, please don't ever talk about the poor witches that were burned in Salem, because there were no witches burned in Salem.
Yeah.
Ever.
And there really wasn't a whole lot that were burned. It was mostly hangings.
Most were hangings. There were a lot of drownings. Because of one of the ways to get a confession was swimming the witch.
If you float, you're a witch. If you survive the drowning, or if you survive being held underwater or whatever, you're a witch. If you don't survive, they're not a witch, which is so.
And they did sorts of different things for that, because sometimes they would tie your legs together and then throw you in water. Other times you'd be hooked onto a chair and then dunked in the water.
Either way, you were gonna die.
I forget what the terminology is for that thing, that the dunking chair.
Unless you were a mermaid
and then
could survive that.
They would do ones where they would tie you to a rock and throw you in the water, and then if you float, you're innocent.
I think it's ridiculous.
Love your concrete shoes.
So yeah, the whole thing, why they call it the burning times, that's I think that's just a catch-all phrase, because we are so used to hearing about burning the witch at the stake, and
was somewhat popularized by Isaac Bonowitz back in the 60s or 70s. And a lot of pagans in that era kind of clung to it. And we're still kind of dealing with some of the fallout on where some of that was half truth.
Yeah.
Down to the numbers on the estimation on how many people died.
And that was
there's a lot of,
There's the high number of 9 million, and then there's the more realistic
lower numbers of like 100,000.
But either way, a lot of people died, and they were innocent. They were innocent people. It was a terrible time to be different.
It was a terrible time to be on the earth.
It was a terrible time to not practice what everyone else was practicing. Whether you were Christian but still like to do things differently, because that's normal. I mean, you and think about it. In these villages, the Christians, or those that called themselves Christians, were going to these women for healing. So they obviously believed that what these women were doing was.
But that's kind of where it came
valid.
Into that was the old method of healing. We see it.
But they're today's doctors.
They're today's doctors.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, because they're today's doctors. We see it like this is I kind of hate the term when history repeats itself, because it does and it doesn't. But this is a situation where you can look at it and there's this element that repeats itself, because the church had the nuns and they wanted people to go to there for medicine and rely on faith and rely on prayer. They did do other things other than just prayer. Mm-hmm. And they did a huge service to people, but they also did a disservice to the people who were like, drink this tea and come back next Tuesday.
Yeah.
they would get people who had expired herbs because there wasn't exactly expiration dates, or
Could cause
some. I forget what it was. One of the ones in Salem where it was rye flour that had gone rancid, and that caused the seizures in the girls.
Yes, that caused hallucinations, and it was the rye in the bread. Yeah,
but it's not that far of a stretch to imagine that this happened in other areas of the world in that same kind of time frame.
Yeah,
where people were developing a different type of skepticism.
Yeah, but it's so to say that it was all witches, that it wasn't. There were witches. There were some witches. But either way, it was terrible. Innocent people died. That's all you got to know. Whether you believe it was a shitload of witches or a shitload of Christians or a shitload of people who were neither or whatever, it was innocent people that died, and you were being targeted if you were doing something, if you stood out, if you were doing. So basically, like us people, it would be like me walking down the street with tattoos and different hair color and whatever, and being just pointed at and saying, you're a devil worshiper, you must be a witch, come with us, we're going to torture you and question you. And
it's also an important thing to note that there are areas of the world where there still are witch trials.
Yes,
it's a serious thing in certain areas of the world. I know some African areas that will literally go and pull people out of their houses and burn them in the streets.
Yeah.
So it's
just for being different.
It's not something to even laugh about now.
No, it's a serious thing, and we need to understand that whether these people were witches or not, they were being targeted because they were different. And then you can get into the reasons why they did that. So they wanted, people to, wanted everyone to be Christian, conform.
And be adult. No, I'm just kidding.
I always say, just in case there's Christians watching, but I don't know if any Christians would watch our Witches and Wine. But if you are, welcome, and we welcome all religions. L'chaim. We can drink on that.
At least you didn't say Mazel Tov.
I took notes because this is such a good topic, and I know enough about it, but I had to remind myself.
Well, especially if you want dates or anything important.
Yeah, so I did take some notes. I do have written down here. So when one of the things that happened after the Inquisition and these witches or different folk were sacrificed. Why do I keep forgetting the word? Executed. It's like forgetting the email address. I'm just going to look to you for the email address and the word executed.
I'm a robot.
Execute.
crossroadscoven@gmail.com.
There, see, I've got her trained really well. One of the things that happened too is when these people were executed, they started building churches over a lot of pagan areas, and it took over, Christianity kind of took over, and it took away from goddess worship, because we did worship back then a lot of female entities and whatnot, and they turned it towards more of a male entities, more saints and whatnot. So, to me, that kind of symbolizes what their end game was. They wanted it to be more uniform, or let's get rid of that old religion crap and put
up. And a lot of that too just kind of comes from the one-wayism that comes along with that, and where you want people to conform because you have to spread the word of God, because everyone needs to know about that. And we need to be united underneath this one big banner, which in some ways, kind of sounds almost like this poetic thing, but then you saw it in practice, where it's like, yeah, that was kind of not very good for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel that there was more than just a religious cleansing that influenced this. I had, under some of my research, we were talking about the financial part of it, where these, so like, let's say Isleen gets accused of being a witch back then. So Isleen has her land, okay? She's got like a little house, a little bit of land, some goats, whatever. And someone accuses her, Isleen is a witch, she's a devil worshiper. That was the big part. It wasn't just witch, it was like devil worshiping. Like, they made it like so dark and nasty. And but so what would happen is all these fees and charges would be against her.
Yep.
So she would be charged for having to, for the Inquisition, for being held in jail, for the court date, for whatever. They found all these things. And so let's say she gets tortured and she dies and whatever. So her family has to pay those fees. It was a great way to make money in the community. And another thing that I think motivated it, and this could be a conspiracy theory, this could be whatever, but I found this interesting, was that it also was a great employment opportunity for people in the law.
Like how many people, the freaking Witchfinder General,
yes,
I forget his name,
yeah.
He kind of made this job just from thin air, and it's like, I'm the
witch hunter, or I'm the one, and not only that, but the lawyers and the judges and all of that created job security for these people. So, I mean, maybe I'm stretching a bit, but there's always an ulterior motive besides the obvious, which was we want to make Christianity the main thing. I think people, when it started to pick up speed, I think people started to notice that, oh, we can make money from this. There's job security. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you think
I think that's a valid point.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about it on that note. Like, we know ones that were executed up on the up and up, because we know that there are trial records and there were execution records. But as we know from the world we live in, most of the time things are found out about now eventually. But how many people were executed outside of the law,
without the proper channels,
where they weren't,
it was just
a lynch mob came into them. I mean, the pitchforks, especially when you're talking in some of these small little hamlet towns.
Yeah, and the majority of these were in rural areas. So these were small townships. These were places, and word of mouth, and that's another thing, is that's why it spread so quick, because everybody knew everyone in the town. So one person was accused and everybody heard about it. The town,
well, especially
gossip.
It didn't help that there wasn't, you had things with the town crier and shit where they'd be like,
that was our Facebook.
Here he is.
Isleen has been accused of crimes against God. Hear ye. I don't know what this is. Is this the bell?
That's the bell.
Hear ye. Her hanging will be viewed on a fortnight uponeth which that thoueth placeth in the hangeth square. So anyway, because it was exactly like that, what I just said. So I've got some more talking points. And there was, I watched this documentary called The Burning Times. There's a bunch of them. If you look it up, you'll see several.
I'll put some links too, because I like the Witches: A Century of Murder.
Yeah.
That talks about King James and all his.
Yes. Oh,
stuff.
and I want to talk about that too in a minute. But this documentary, The Burning Times, and this was more from a, like they interviewed Starhawk, and this was more of a, from the feminine aspect. But that needs to be recognized, because they did say 80%, and I don't know if it's their numbers, but I've heard this before. It was mostly women. It was a good amount of women, and they talked. Oh, go ahead.
That's kind of what happens when you blame half of a population for the sins of everyone.
Well, and that's the thing, is women were blamed for everything. And it was the women that were the healers. It was the women that were the midwives. It was the women that threatened the church. And again, I'm not coming from a anti-male perspective.
Men were out doing their jobs where women were home to
Yeah.
take care of the family and their neighbor.
And the village. They were in the village, and they were the ones that. So it was set up that way.
Yeah.
So by whether it was patriarchal or not, it was just the way it was set up.
Yeah.
We're stay-at-home moms. So I know, just our husbands are away working. We know what's going on in our village more than our husbands do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're the one. We know what's going on with the kids. We know what's going on with the neighbor kids. We know what's going. You know what I mean? Like, we know the what's going on at the school. We know. So whether it was patriarchal or not, it was just set up that way. The women knew what was going on. They ran the household. They were the ones. So they were home. They were taking care of the kids, and they were.
And you had your commons areas, and that's where people would gather to shoot the shit. And
Yeah.
if they wanted out of their own house, they would go into the commons area to maybe get water.
Yeah.
And they didn't have plumbing.
Yeah.
If you had spinning that needed to be done and you didn't want to sit at home, you would go and you would go somewhere else to do your spinning of the wool. And that became part of their entertainment too. The needlepoint, a lot of that stuff. That's why things became so ingrained in the culture. There's almost like this element of culture war that comes with this. It's beyond just personal thing. It was this way of life can no longer be. We need to move into this one that we think is better.
Which we think is better for whatever reason. And so there's so many different elements. That's why I find it fascinating that it's not just a religious thing, but it's a cultural thing. It's a political thing. It is financial. And it's a gender issue too, because when you start getting into a more Abrahamic religion, it's a little, they're threatened by, I mean, they blamed women for original sin, so why wouldn't they?
Also, a lot of the women that were like picked at were the ones that weren't conforming to what the Christian ideal of femininity of that time was. Yeah. So it was you've been divorced twice, you obviously
that
are
was
a witch.
Unheard of. Yes. And I mean, I think about, my own grandmother on my mother's side, my Mexican grandmother, this was in the 40s and 50s, 30s and 40s probably. She was married twice. She had kids from two different husbands. She worked like 3 jobs to raise 10 kids. She was very independent. And the word bruja, which is just Spanish for witch, was thrown around in her face. And then she had her hereditary, her cultural things that she did that were passed down. She would make poultices and salves and stuff like that for healing. And so it's happened even within this, our lifetime. Well, not our lifetime, but at least my grandmother's lifetime, our grandparents' lifetime, where she was being pointed at and what?
20th century.
Yes, 20th century, and being called a witch, and whether she was or not, which I think she was, but that's not the point. The point is she was an independent woman for that time and doing something that was unconventional. So that was a lot of it. And unfortunately, I don't want to say it's because I have a lot of male witches in my life. I don't want them to think that we're blaming this on men. We're not.
No.
It's just
because there were unconventional men
too that were
wrangled
accused.
Into it.
Yes. If you were unconventional, and if you have and being an unconventional woman at the time was just,
or oftentimes, like, as sad as it is to say, it was like this sort of, for some elderly people, there was a use that was sort of it's a way that we can put them down.
Yeah. Because
I know one of the gals had like a wooden leg. This was in somewhere in Europe. It was kind of one of the first ones that set off something there. And again, I cannot remember her name, but she was old. They kept her up for like 3 days straight using sleep deprivation. She had one leg. They took her wooden leg away from her. They like
beat her with it. No,
I think they did the where they wrap your head around the ropes and then pull them. Like
Ooh.
it
Ah!
like crushes your skull
God.
with a rope.
God, they really come up with some creative, weird torture.
We could choose to be nice, but we choose to be
dicks.
assholes.
So we got to wrap it up because I got to go pick up Silenus from the wine store. But real quick, can you talk about the King James thing that you were talking about?
Okay.
I found that fascinating.
So one of the big things that kind of created this already perfect storm and gave it another little light under the fire is King James the first or fourth. It's the same person because he was the King James the first in one country, first in England, I think, and fourth in Scotland, but I could have that backwards. He was fascinated and terrified of witchcraft. And it sort of stemmed from he had a bride-to-be that was supposed to come up. I think it was King Anne from Denmark.
King Anne?
Queen Anne from Denmark. Yes.
They were transgender back then. See? Ahead of their time.
Queen Elizabeth. I hear that. It's
Yeah.
a theory. But she never made it. The ship was lost at sea. And somewhere along the lines, it got a bug in his ear that witches caused the storm that made the ship go away. And so he was fascinated and he kind of became obsessed with this. And what became a huge thing is because he wrote a book. Demonology. And this was the first book that was kind of put out by a reigning monarch. And you can just imagine this would be, it would be the same thing as like any president or any king that makes a statement that people are going to take seriously because of their status. So he did that, and that kind of, there was some chain of events that happened before, because there was a papal bull that was from, I think, Pope Innocent III. Again, I'm not sure.
Don't quote her on it. Look it up.
That talks about the witches that are amongst us and how they're there. But he writes demonology, and that kind of gets some more traction. He wrote a couple of different books on it, and eventually it leads to the Malleus Maleficarum.
Yep, and I wrote that down here.
The Malleus Maleficarum is the Hammer of the Witches, and is legitimately like the guidebook on the handling of these witches that are out amongst you.
And I was going to bring that up, and that is can we type that in there? Would people see that in our thing?
Yeah, I think
Malleus,
so.
Can you spell it?
No, I can't spell it.
I got it right here. I'm going to type it. Say something. You got to look this up. Malleus. Maleficarum. It's by Kramer and Sprenger. There you go.
Demonology is written by King James.
And it's spelled weird.
Yeah, you
but
just look that one up.
Demonology by what?
It's on IE. I know it's on IE.
IE?
Mm-hmm.
By King James. So look these up. These are precursors to how to basically, when people got paranoid and were like, how do we question witches? How do we find them? They're the Malleus I can never say it.
Malleus Maleficarum.
Execution. Crossroads@gmail.com. Wait, Crossroads coming. I even got it wrong. Anyway, sorry. The Malleus, that thing. I've read it, and it is highly sexual. They are obsessed with witches having like shitloads of sex, which we talked about last week. How people have this thing about us that we just fuck everything. Some of us do. But sexuality and
one of our gods is named Pan.
I mean, hello. Sexuality, women's sexuality was a big part also of threatening the more conservative, and so that was a huge part playing into, she's a witch, she's having, sex with demons, and so the Malleus Maleficarum, it's quite, for people who were afraid of women's sexuality. Wow, they wrote about a lot of sex. Like, it's like, I think that might be your problem. Like, you have some hangups, but anyway, so that's neither here nor there. I hate to cut this short, but we do have to go. I have to go pick up my husband. I think I touched upon a lot of the stuff that I wanted to. Yeah. Look up the Burning Times. Let's type that in.
Yeah, that's one of the perks of this.
The Burning Times.
And the Witches, A Century of Murder.
And Witches, A Century of Murder. Red Rum?
I know, well, I don't know if it is still or not, but Witches, A Century of Murder was at least on Netflix. I don't know if it still is on Netflix.
You can find the Burning Times documentary. It's a little over an hour. It's on YouTube.
There's a lot of stuff you can find on YouTube.
Yeah, look it up. It's really interesting. So anyway, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, or you want to be a guest, or you want to just hang with these cool witches, then please email us at
crossroadscoven@gmail.com.
What was that?
crossroadscoven@gmail.com.
That's right. So remember, always be kind to one another and walk with the goddess. And until next time, blessed be. Clink and drink. Clink and drink. My thing is empty, but that's okay. Enjoy your wine, everyone.
Drink your air.
Your air. Drink your air. Bye.